And I think it's pretty important to make the point that Manchester United, doesn't need state-owned money to compete at the top end of world football.
So how many times have we sat here before with Gareth and gone, I wish he changed something, I wish he tried this player in this position, tried Tomori, tried Lewis Dunk at least.
I was just like, I back him to succeed, and apparently that was an idiotic thing to say.
Welcome back to Monday Vibes, one and all. We are at Sky. Zach Jalab's here, Doogie Critchley's here. Boys, how are you?
Better than you.
Yeah,
that sounds like Jeff warmed up.
I know. I've got to try and keep myself into gear here. I'm slowly just, where like you just get
end up on a stretcher by the end of the episode.
Not the best night's sleep, and just slowly
Winter comes in, you've been hit.
We'll be back. Don't worry about that. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. I think you could tell by our attire that it suddenly got a little bit colder here in England. Definitely had that kind of winter freeze come over. But yeah, no, not too bad, thank you, mate. How are you, Diggs?
Yeah, all good. I enjoyed watching some other sports as well as football this weekend. I watched England lose to Afghanistan in cricket.
Yeah,
hell of a result for the Afghanistan team. And then loads of the rugby yesterday, which was actually epic. But loads of football to discuss, Joe, starting with your club.
The big news at the weekend, of course, breaking about the Manchester United takeover situation. So that is exactly where we're going to start. Sheikh Jassim apparently dropping out the race. So it's claimed.
Yeah.
Never say never, but apparently he is done, and it seems like Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to take 25% of the club for around 1.4 billion, pending board approval, which I believe is on Thursday. So this hasn't actually been ratified yet. Seems like a deal has been agreed in principle, but a little bit of a way to go to get this thing over the line. Now, this caused a lot of debate online. A lot. Dukes, where are you coming down on it?
I think it's the start of a period of good news for Man United. Obviously, everyone wants the Glazers gone, who's connected with that club. I think rivals probably quite enjoying, Man United suffering, but anyone connected with Man United would want the Glazers out. And this has been a long time coming. It's been a summer where they talked about these two bids for, when did it start? So April, May
February?
time?
I think originally February.
Even earlier than that. Okay,
yeah.
so
the statement came out the same day Cristiano Ronaldo.
It's dominated the best part of a year. And if I was a Man United fan, I'd be personally delighted that the Qatari bid is no longer. I think Jim Ratcliffe has more experience managing football clubs and, is been linked with Premier League clubs in the past. And you don't have the slightly controversial, very controversial fact of being owned by a nation with, attachments to dodgy human rights records, etc. Even though that is so ingrained in football already, they own PSG, for example, Abu Dhabi having links to Man City, etc. But I think Sir Jim Ratcliffe is the easier bid to deal with from a moral perspective. And also, I think it does spell good news for Man United. The only thing is, 25% stake is not very much. How does it work in terms of the day-to-day running of the football club? How does it work in terms of the voting rights? Where does the money go that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is using? There are so many unanswered questions, and I think it just leads to a little bit more uncertainty. But it's definitely it's a step in the right direction, but it's definitely not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. I would agree, but I think there are major problems with the bid so far, or at least on the surface of it. There's a lot of questions that Manchester United fans need answering, because at the end of the day, the Glazers need to go, and it has to be a full sale at some stage. So I think number one question has to be laid out. Does this 25% incorporate a further either contractual or gentleman's agreement that you will take the majority stake off the Glazers at some stage, be that in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, whenever? Is that a thing? Which I think United fans have every right to find out at this stage. I also think there are big question marks about what it means for the debt at the club. 700 million in debt. Does this go towards paying it off? What's the plan towards paying off that debt? What happens to the money that gets put into the club? What does this 1.4 billion, where does that go? Is that just going in the Glazers' pocket? Is it being reinvested in the stadium? We saw the Times article come out this morning that Ineos are making plans to redevelop Old Trafford into a 90,000-seater stadium, which is obviously music to United fans' ears. But what's the realistic timeline? Where are the plans laid out for that to happen? What does this mean for the sporting side of Manchester United? Because, we've seen over the weekend that this 25% supposedly gets Sir Jim Ratcliffe full sporting control. He takes all of the sporting control out of the Glazers' hands. So I'm sure there'll be quite a few worried people at Old Trafford over the weekend.
Oh, okay, it's in terms of
that news, in terms of how and what this means
Their job security.
for their jobs, because we know David Brailsford is extremely likely to come in, and it's very, very likely Paul Mitchell will follow, according to reports in the
From
Athletic.
a fan point of view, though, surely that's a positive thing, right? Like, I think a lot of United fans have questioned how the club's been run on a footballing standpoint for a while now. You even think kind of what's happened even recently, things haven't worked massively well. And having somebody involved in the club, even if at 25%, that is focused on trying to get things working on the pitch and trying to have that as the forefront of their minds and not kind of a money-making thing, as more so the Glazers are, is a positive.
To a level, yes, but how does the breakdown of responsibilities truly split? How can a minority shareholder be in full control of a sporting project? How does that work? Does the final sign-off still lie with Joel Glazer? Does, let's say, Ineos want to make a change and remove John Murtagh as football director and put in Paul Mitchell into that position? Does Joel Glazer still have the final say there, or does that lie with Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Yet more questions there to be answered. I think we can forget about the kind of Qatari bid for now. And to a level, the chat online over the weekend I found really quite painful, from a lot of sort of Manchester United fans, from a lot of influencers in the space, from a lot of United fan accounts sort of tweeting this is the end of Manchester United, RIP Manchester United. I think it's pretty important to make the point that Manchester United doesn't need state-owned money to compete at the top end of world football. This is one of the biggest clubs, probably one of the three biggest clubs in world football, a money-making machine. It needs the money spent the correct way, invested in the correct manner in the club, on the field and off the field to make it successful, and that's what the Glazers have not done. This 25% has to lead to a full takeover, because you cannot have the Glazers still in the building, taking the dividends, sitting back, relaxing, and taking their money home whilst also piling debt onto the club. That cannot happen. But at this stage, I suppose, like you say, Doogie, something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
And it feels like it got to the stage a little bit where it was either this or nothing.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think they would have pulled out, the same way that Sheikh Jassim did. It was such a tiring, long process. It felt like it was nearing conclusion at various points during the summer, and then it would be off the table again. So I think this is, Sir Jim Ratcliffe will be delighted to get his foot in the door if it does go through on Thursday. And he can start making some changes to the side of the club that has actually suffered most in the last 10 years. The commercial side of the club has pretty much been unhurt, really, by a massive period of underachievement. And that is, a slight credit to Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold for that side of it. Like, they are clearly very good at what they do in terms of boosting the commercial operation, the commercial side of the club. But the football side of the club has not been at its anywhere close to operating at full capacity. So having new blood in there, a new decision maker, can only be a good thing. I do agree with you, though. It does lead to a slightly awkward who's in charge, who signs off, who has
There's a lot of questions.
And also a big step up. You mentioned his kind of time at Nice, which hasn't necessarily been swimmingly good, or gone swimmingly. And so, it's going to be a big step up for him to go to the level of Manchester United, where there's so many more eyeballs, so much more pressure. You're going from a completely different wage structure, a completely different market and league from Ligue 1 to, which is obviously in the top 5, to arguably the best league in the world.
And it's often used.
It's a big step up.
It's often kind of used, and it has been over the last month or so, particularly at the weekend, as this sort of stick to beat Sir Jim Ratcliffe with, look at what's happened since he's been at Nice and the time at Nice. And I think they have finished 5th, 9th. They're currently second in the league. But, there has been significant investment in Nice. There has been a new training ground in development. And yes, it has not gone right on the field. And I think that's very clear. There was some big differences in style at Nice over the last 2 years. I think when you think of that summer of recruitment that was vastly Premier League based, like Kasper Schmeichel Aaron Ramsey came in. That was under Ian Moody, wasn't it? Ian Moody's kind of been removed from his position and replaced with Florian Schifosli, who is the guy from Lens as well. He came in, kind of saw Terra Moffi and that come in. So clearly they are learning quickly what works, what doesn't work, who to appoint, who not to appoint. And you're kind of hoping as a Manchester United fan, because that's all we can do is hope, that the time at Nice has been a learning experience enough that they can then implement that at Old Trafford, because I think people like Richard Arnold, his job will be under threat here. If he gets full control of the sporting operation, I think a lot of senior figures at Manchester United will change. Jean-Claude Blanc, of course, has come in exclusively to work with Ineos. He was the former PSG and the former Juventus CEO. You know, if he's been brought in exclusively to work with Ineos, you think Richard Arnold's job potentially in a bit of jeopardy there. We've spoken already about John Murtagh, the head of football operations. He's been there for what now, 18 months, 2 years at Manchester United as sort of director of football operations. I think he'll be looking over his shoulder big time now that Paul Mitchell's bought that house in the north of England. He did such excellent work across the continent, particularly most recently at Monaco, where kind of revamped their whole footballing operation from data science to injuries. An amazing article about Paul Mitchell in The Athletic, actually, where I think it was Adam Crafton spent a week with him. And he's, you know, clearly that's his remit.
He's been wanted for a lot of clubs for a long time
Spurs
as well.
Now. Linked to them for a long time.
I think he was at Spurs, wasn't he? He was at Spurs prior to Leipzig. But I think effectively, judging by what you read, he would be the guy to come in alongside David Brailsford in terms of the sporting operations and kind of revamp things. Because United sporting operations, like you said, Dukes, they've been rudderless, really. It's been pretty rudderless at the top there.
And they've also been, like, compared to, when you look at the other levels of the Champions League clubs and kind of the people that United are competing to, in comparison, the United's level of it is just nowhere near. They've never been able to catch up with them. They've never been able to. They're always a step behind these
they're
guys.
an incredibly reactive club, United. There's very little proactive work going on there. It's when something goes wrong, they react to it. When something needs changing, they react to it rather than being proactive, being on the front foot. They seem a long way behind in things like data science and data-led recruitment. So you're hoping, again, that's all we can do as United fans, that Sir Jim Ratcliffe can usher in, if he's going to take full control of the sporting side of that, Paul Mitchell comes in, that can kind of change, but I don't think it's going to be quick. My issues again, though,
nothing's going to be quick. Nothing's going to be quick in this scenario.
I know, but my issues come back to, again, like what happens to the Glazers pot here. 25% of, is it going to be voting rights? Is it going to be new shares being issued here? How does it affect their Class B shares? Because, of course, they only own 69% of the club, but have 96% of the voting rights because of the Class B share structure. How does the 25% affect that? There's just so many questions with a minority takeover, and I think unless that minority takeover can come out publicly and engage with things like the Manchester United Supporters Trust, sit there and say, if Sir Jim Ratcliffe goes there and sits in front of the Man United Supporters Trust and says, this is how it's going to work, I've agreed to do a takeover for the majority over the next 5 years. I could only get 25%, which is going to start with a sporting project. This is the timeline. This is how we're going to engage. This is what we're going to do with the stadium. This is what we're going to do with the debt. Then I think there are massive problems even with a minority takeover here.
Yeah. It also comes at a bad time for some of the chief executives or higher ups. You know, Richard Arnold went through a really difficult summer, pretty much out of his own making with the whole Mason Greenwood fiasco, saying that he found him effectively not guilty. There was that report again by Adam Crafton, who, you know, is probably the leading United investigative journalist, and he was saying that lots of female staff were unhappy with his management of the club and how they felt heard or not heard during his time there. So, you know, it wouldn't be surprising at all if his position was under serious threat. I think the good thing about Sir Jim Ratcliffe is he's never been particularly dominant in his own organisations, or, you know, what I say goes in a way that a lot of football owners have. You know, Sir Dale Brave, he's always recruited the best in the business to run his teams. Like Sir Dave Brailsford was like a real innovator with Team Sky and then Ineos and then the GB Olympic team for cycling. And yeah, he's appointed some good managers in the past as well. You know, we wouldn't suggest that Eric Ten Hag's job's under threat as well. But yes, there has been some questionable transfer strategy. But I think generally his appointments at Nice have been very good. So yeah, it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, let's keep moving on then to some football over the weekend. The international break, of course, not that we're the most buzzing by it, but the Premier League's back this weekend. England beat Australia though.
Yeah.
1-0. Wow, what a stunningly mediocre game this was.
Yeah. They didn't really create very many opportunities either side, really. And England actually got quite lucky at different points. Like Sam Johnson made a really good save from Bacchus after his shot deflected off Tomori. Dunk had to kind of clear one off the line as well. But it seemed like from what I saw that the England forwards were maybe pushing a little too high up and there was no one really connecting it in the way that Harry Kane sometimes does.
It was also, it was much more like an England B team.
Definitely.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously,
This was auditions for Euro spots.
Exactly that. You saw obviously Lewis Dunk and Tamori partner each other.
Cole at left back.
Cole at left back. Trent started at right back, I think. Or did he come on at right back?
Either way, yeah.
Either way. And then you saw a front line of Bowen and Watkins, Grealish, who's obviously come back from injury over the past few weeks. So like definitely a few auditions for their kind of roles, or how they could try and get significant minutes in the next couple of months at least, obviously with the Euros coming in the summer. But yeah, I think sometimes when we watch international football, we expect, especially with how England have been over recent years, you expect blowouts every single time. You expect England to be amazing every single time, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. Like in club football, you're not the best team every single day in and out. But obviously they got the win, and in a game like this where it doesn't necessarily mean as much as say the Euros does, which is obviously happening on Tuesday, then you can try and test things. So how many times have we sat here before with Gareth and gone, I wish he changed something, I wish he tried this player in this position, tried Tamori, tried Lewis Dunk at least, even in goal, Johnson, as you mentioned, had a fantastic performance. So like he deserves a bit of credit there, I think, for trying things, and with so many different players and so many different changes as well, you're gonna maybe we should expect a little bit more of a lackluster team, or that kind of performance anyway.
Yeah, it was definitely, I agree, it was a chance for players to show them Gareth Southgate what they can do, and I don't think loads of them took that chance. I think Ollie Watkins still looks very bright, and I really think he should be going on the plane to Germany in the summer. I would be surprised if he isn't, if he carries on his current form.
A long like 8 months or so.
Yeah, it's a long 8 months. Should we also talk about the biggest talking point of the game, I think, which is when Jordan Henderson was booed off the pitch?
Yes.
By a large number of England fans at Wembley, which obviously he didn't think was going to happen. That report in the summer, the interview Adam Carter in the summer, he talked about, I don't think I'll get that sort of reception at Wembley. Well, he did get that sort of reception at Wembley, and afterwards Gareth Southgate said that it defies logic. Does it defy logic?
No.
I think
it doesn't quite make sense.
it's fairly logical. This is a guy who's effectively thrown his morals away for money. You know, he backed a number of campaigns that are the polar opposite of where he plays his football right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's fairly obvious why the fans are booing him, and I think it's quite unlike Gareth Southgate, actually, because I think he stood really strong on a number of different topics, Gareth Southgate, where previous England managers would probably have cowered away from them. He stood up and been very vocal in his support for LGBT plus rights. He's stood up and been very vocal on a number of different cultural issues. On this one, though, it feels like he's kind of gone back to the classic football manager of, I don't really get what's going on here.
It's
like, what happens on the pitch is on the pitch. But
it's strange.
It's bizarre,
strange.
that one for me. I don't know what's happened there.
I think you're right. For somebody who, over the last 7 years or so, we've been able to look at and think, you know what, he speaks very well about certain topics. I think it's a bit naive for them to say this stuff, having looked at the like kind of the outcry when it happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't just say online. People going to games and everything were talking about how this kind of defies logic, defies the kind of way his stance on things, being a leader in certain communities, and then doing this move doesn't make any sense. And I think, look, like, part of me sits there and thinks you've got to hold your hands up, Jordan Henderson. Like, you've done this move. You've gone yeah, exactly. You've got to own it. Coming out and saying like, "Oh, I'm shocked that this has happened." What do you mean? What do you mean? People, you saw what happened when you made the move, what everybody was speaking about, and now you're kind of surprised that they're complaining now. Like, this was always what was happening over the past month or so since you've moved to Saudi Arabia.
And I also think, like, last week Jordan Henderson was playing in front of 900 people in the Saudi Pro League.
Yeah, I can see that.
You get 900 people in the 8th tier of English football. I think if Gareth Southgate was selecting players that were playing in the 8th tier of English football, there would be some uproar about that as well. So I think we're talking about a player here who is not playing at a high enough calibre to play for England in a pressurised situation week on week, who has also, like we said, had major issues surrounding the most recent transfer. And I just don't understand the comment of it defies logic. I think if Gareth Southgate had come out afterwards and said, you know what, I can understand people's frustration there, I'm going to continue to pick him based on the fact I trust him, he's
a loyal
one of my more
member of my
experienced
team,
But it just comes across so defensive.
I
And
just don't get
also
it.
that you take sort of football fans for mugs and think that they should only care about who's on the pitch for footballing reasons. Like, of course, there's a lot of people that feel very let down by his decision to go there, that felt they were slightly betrayed by his
100%.
decision to go down there. And I'm actually quite proud of England fans for booing him. You know, it's a friendly against Australia. It's not a particularly high-pressure environment, and they've made their feelings known. Like, whether it continues or not is a different matter, but they've made a statement. And it's not totally surprising from a non-footballing decision that they're booing him, or from a footballing decision. You know, as Joe says, you know, he's not playing at the right level to be able to contribute at the Euros next summer. So it's almost entirely pointless picking him now.
Yeah.
Like, we know what he can do, but why aren't you picking James Ward-Prowse, for example, who started the season so well at West Ham, who's got a decent chance of going to the Euros
Especially
next
in a
summer
game like this,
and contributing?
You're showcasing everybody, hey, look, I'm playing other players, so I'm giving them the chance that everyone's calling for, and you've not picked James Ward-Prowse for this.
Even someone like Harvey Elliott, who's playing really well for the England under-21 side and has had some good performances for Liverpool. Like, he's the future. Like, maybe he could have picked him as well. So I'm not surprised that England fans booed him, and I thought it was actually a really good move for them. And actually, yeah, I totally agree with you. Southgate coming across as like super, super defensive. And yes, when it was about Maguire being booed, I get it, because he's been a scapegoat for years now, and it's pretty cruel. But for Jordan Henderson, he's actually been got away pretty scot-free from what was a decision that let down so many people. So I'm not surprised at all.
Obviously, Wembley, is it tomorrow?
Yes.
Italy
Italy
tomorrow.
Italia.
A slightly bigger game. I think you'll see the big guns rolled back out for this one. Harry Kane and co. back in the side. Do we think England win that again? Because, you know, the record at home is pretty outstanding. Is it 12 qualifiers in a row, one at home?
But Italy's record away in Euro qualifying is insane as well. They haven't lost away from home in Euros qualifying since 2006, which is an absolutely mad stat.
That's mad, yeah.
Over 20 games, I think that is, in that period. They beat Malta on Saturday or Friday, I think it was. Malta were not up to much, but they looked really sharp in that. They've got a few issues, though, in the Italy squad. Obviously, Sandro Tonali and Nicola Zaniolo having some allegations of betting issues or breaking the betting rules. Fagioli, who plays for Juventus, who wasn't actually picked by Spalletti, was involved in that as well. So that's a little sort of overhanging their situation. But yeah, they looked good against Malta. Domenico Berardi scoring 2 excellent goals. Giacomo Bonaventura as well got his first goal for Italy. He's been excellent for Fiorentina this season. One of the most underrated sort of Italian midfielders of the last decade. I think mainly because he was playing for Milan in that period where they were really, really bad. But yeah, I think it'll be a fascinating game, and one that I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night at home. I think it's at Wembley.
If you look at that team compared to, say, this is England-wise, less so Italy. If you look at the England team of the Euros final compared to the England team that could theoretically start tomorrow, do you think we've improved?
Good question. I think we'd have liked Luke Shaw at left back, ideally, in an ideal world. John Stones as well, you'd probably want him at full fitness. But we've definitely improved
when
in
everyone's
midfield.
fit, definitely in the midfield. Jude Bellingham.
Yeah, the midfield's definitely got better.
He's a vast upgrade in that position, isn't it? And the only issue I think is potentially, you know, Raheem Sterling was so magnificent at that tournament that
and there was Saka as we just
haven't necessarily got the output on the left that we had from Raheem Sterling at that tournament, where he was probably our best player and most effective player in
Maddison's
the forward
now
areas.
playing exceptionally well as well.
Yeah, and Saka's probably
he's
at
not
a new
in
level.
the squad for this one, but normally.
No, I think it's very positive for England at the moment. Anyway, let's go to another positive then for a home nation, Scotland, qualifying again, back-to-back tournaments for them. That comes after Spain beat Norway. Of course, they were robbed in Spain, Scotland midweek anyway, with that Scott McTominay whip.
So nice.
100% should have counted. VAR robbing them. Scott McTominay, one of the best goal scorers in Europe right now from midfield.
Oh, he is.
No, I get it.
He's one of the top scorers in qualifying.
Let's start him for Manchester United then. Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made that potentially could happen. But no, in all seriousness,
he is.
Steve Clarke.
Back of the net.
Steve Clarke done a very good job there to get him to another international tournament. And Norway, I think, disappointing, man.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it wasn't a brilliant game between Spain and Norway. There was also a moment where Morata scored an offside goal. He tapped in a ball that was going over the line and it was ruled out for offside, which wasn't
that reminds me, do you remember Cristiano Ronaldo, Nanny?
Yes. He did not look happy that day. I actually saw some Spanish pundits on Twitter being like, he should be substituted immediately, Morata, for that error. But anyway, they got the win in the end. Gavi getting another goal. I think that's 5 goals in 25 games now. He's playing really well for Barcelona as well, with Pedri and Frenkie de Jong currently injured. Gavi's kind of holding that midfield together at points. I think he's been excellent this season. But yeah, great news for Steve Clarke. I mean, Scotland qualifying with 2 games to spare. They haven't qualified, I think, out of a group stage in qualifying since 1997, because they qualified for the last Euros through the Nations League as well. So this is, absolutely excellent. They won their first 5 games, which really put them in a great position. And now it's about topping the group, because Spain and Scotland are level on points with 2 games to go. Spain ahead on goal difference, but Spain do have easier fixtures as well. I think they've got Georgia and Cyprus, who are bottom of that group. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating. But fair play to Scotland. I think they've got really good midfield depth.
Really good.
Probably lack an outstanding striker to go deep in a tournament, but with that crowd, with that atmosphere, with that feeling around the side, let's see what they can do.
Good fullback depth as well, Aaron
Great
Hickey and Andy Robertson. I think there are definitely some
Kieran
talented
Tierney to come back as
players
well.
in that Scotland setup. Yeah, like you say, it's just a bit of a shame that they don't have that 9. Like Scott McTominay basically is bailing him out. I know we joke about the amount of goals he scored, but for Scotland in particular, he has gone effectively from being at the centre of a back 3 to being a second shadow striker. He's played the entirety of that spine for Scotland, and you say hats off to him, man. Like, what more can he do for Scotland? It's sensational.
And for nations the size of Scotland alike, like you find sometimes in international tournaments, there are players that just become a little bit superhuman and end up playing in a position.
Look at Croatia over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, should we come on to Croatia straight off the back of that then? Because they lost against Wales, now looking in jeopardy that they're going to automatically qualify anyway for the competition. They are likely, unless, well, to be fair, Wales still really have to win their last 2 group games, because they are only ahead basis of head-to-head record against Croatia at the moment in that group. And I think if you look at the fixtures, Croatia have got Latvia and Armenia, and Wales have got Armenia and Turkey. And Turkey obviously top of the group. I think they're taking 16 from a possible 21. Harry Wilson in this game, though, just exceptional. The header is fantastic with the back of his head.
Harry Wilson's such an interesting player, because I feel like he could have... I feel like he should, from the way his career was developing, it felt like he might have got a bit further already in his years, but he's obviously had several injuries that have impacted him massively. But for Wales, like especially now with no Gareth Bale, with no obviously Ramsey, who's not been there for a few years now, they are looking for that kind of next guy to kind of help them. They need somebody who can step up in those big games. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to be Harry Wilson, because there's a lot of pressure to put on someone. But yeah, fantastic goal, that's for sure.
He's got kind of Bale-ish tendencies. Like he's very good on dead ball scenarios.
He's got a great strike.
Yeah, he can pop up with big moments, and I think he's actually been comparatively poor compared to his normal level for Fulham so far this year. So this was great to see him really step up in a big occasion. And Wales have now beaten Croatia home and away in qualifying. If they'd got it together in their other games, they'd have already been home and dry. That is the
thing, isn't it? Like Rob Page really has been facing a lot of question marks over his continued role as Wales head coach coming into this. I was watching his press conference where he's talking about, like, I'm getting pretty tired about questions about my future here. We need to focus on the players. Well, if they'd have won the easier fixtures in this group, then they would probably have qualified at a little bit of a canter. Like, to have to beat Turkey at home, final game to auto qualify.
Not ideal.
But also, like,
it's not great.
But if you think like the Welsh atmosphere, like it won't be easy for Turkey necessarily either. I mean, there's a lot of teams where that November international break is obviously make or break. And for Wales at home, it could be they've done it before. Yeah, they've done it before, so you'd be surprised.
Just looking at some other big international scores here. Netherlands losing to France.
Yeah,
seen that Kylian Mbappe goal.
It was. I mean, the Kylian Mbappe second goal is outrageous. It's a great little touch from Rabiot to kind of set him up, and spins the ball as well. The finish is fantastic. I mean, Netherlands. I mean, France are just so good. They really are. When they got Antoine Griezmann in that kind of midfield, kind of second striker role, where he could just kind of pop up where he wants and play it where he likes. So he's kind of got that free roaming role that just allows so much more creativity for him. But it was really like Mbappe is just such an elite finisher, man. He can just take chances. Even the first goal's like not necessarily an easy finish, and he takes it really well. I mean, the Netherlands had chances, but nothing.
Xavi Simons was pretty sharp.
Yeah, Xavi Simons did.
They just don't have a 9, though, do they? They don't have that Van Persie, the Van Nistelrooy of yesterday.
They're playing Daniel Marlin down the middle. Yeah, he actually played okay.
Depay is always his injury record is interesting. But yeah, I mean, it looks like it's probably going to be those two, even though the Netherlands are currently, I think, third. They play Greece this week, and they're 3 points behind Greece, who are in second.
Yeah.
And also the Netherlands have a game in hand, and I think that's against Gibraltar, who are bottom of the table and yet to win a game. But France's record looks really good. 17 goals scored this campaign, 1 goal conceded. I think the only ones that are better are Portugal, who have absolutely destroyed their group.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're not saying anything too crazy if you're going to say that France are probably one of the favourites for the Euros.
No, definitely. Liverpool fans will be happy, maybe slightly concerned to see Konate playing for France as well, after a difficult start to the season with injuries for him. I was actually looking at Dutch centre-backs last week, and their depth in centre-back position is absolutely outrageous. Like Van Dijk, Ake, now De Ligt, Mickey van der Ven, Timber, Botman. Like, they've just got an exceptional crop of centre-backs. De Vrij.
Is it Ake?
Said Ake already. But they look very good at the back, and down right wing back as well with Dumfries and Frimpong as well. But yeah, I agree with Joe. They probably lack an outstanding goal scorer in that side at the moment.
And when they don't have Frankie, I think they lack a lot of drive in the midfield as well. He is just the best Dutch player.
It did seem like a lot of the game plan against France was get the ball to Xavi Simmons. Let him try and...
Their goal was exceptional, by the way.
Yeah, really
Bergwijn, playing in Hartman, I think.
Yeah, Paul, I'd reckon Mike Maignan could do a little bit better. Front posts. He kind of goes towards the left.
It's so obvious.
If he thinks like they're going to pass it across. But it's a well taken one.
He's actually had quite a shaky few weeks, Mike Maignan, being sent off against Genoa. And then, I agree. In this game, he didn't look that assured. He also spilled a shot that was
he did.
quite
That kind of goes behind him,
and
manages to pick it up, scoop it up. But France are just they are always
strong
favourites.
Yeah,
they really are.
Final talking point of the weekend then really comes from north of the border. Philippe Clement being appointed as the Rangers manager, their 19th appointment, I think, in their 140 odd year history.
Very loyal club.
Yeah,
that's insane.
It was between him and Kevin Muscat, right? We all know who Kevin Muscat is. If you don't already, type in Kevin Muscat best tackles into YouTube, and you are in for a treat. He is the dirtiest footballer English football
modern day
ever
Ron
seen.
Chopper Harris.
If he was playing nowadays, do you think he'd miss more games than
can't even describe how dirty he is. He
made Roy Keane look like a pussycat.
Yeah. Honestly, there's one tackle where he just knee high, must get wide.
It's arguably the worst tackle of all time.
Yeah, I think it's maybe one of the worst tackles of all time. But he was in
Clearly
contention,
a good coach.
He's at Yokohama, isn't he, at the moment? Clement, though, this actually comes in with a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's done very well in Belgium, which is a league that's comparable to Rangers in that it's dominated by the same sort of teams every year, and they lose most of their talent year on year. Like, he won the league title with Genk, then he won back-to-back titles with Club Bruges, and people were pretty excited when he got appointed Monaco boss in January 2022, I think it was. So he had half of one season, got them from 6th to 2nd, but last year didn't go that well, particularly the end of the year. They ended up finishing 6th, which is outside the European spots, and they had massive defensive issues. They conceded 58 league goals. They did score 70, which was the second best in Ligue 1, but 58 goals against is huge for Monaco. I think that was their most since the mid-70s, so that is a little bit of a concern. But he's known as a pretty good manager, and I really enjoyed watching his teams attack at points last year. They just finished really badly. And there are some factors in that, like they lost Aurélien Tchouameni the summer before last season. They lost Badiashile in the summer, in January, and Disasi was obviously closing in on a move as well. So he's losing a lot of high quality defensive players.
All his best players at the back.
Yeah, so that was maybe a slight factor to consider. But I think it's quite an exciting appointment for Rangers. Their squad looks so far behind Celtic at the moment that it will take a lot of time and patience. Because
you were getting into it on Twitter, weren't you?
Well, the Celtic fans were. Yeah, I was just like, I back him to succeed, and apparently that was an idiotic thing to say because no one can topple Celtic at the moment. It was Hamill and his mates. It wasn't actually Hamill. But yeah, I think he'll do a good job. He can't really do worse than Michael Beale as well.
Yeah.
And what happens to him? Like, he had QPR doing really well. And,
being linked with Wolves.
And then you look as well where QPR went afterwards too. And he made a really tough call. He made a really strong call, to make that move.
Because Wolves wanted him, didn't they? Wolves really wanted him. I think though now, QPR, with Gareth Ainsworth under significant pressure already, Bill back on the market. I don't think he would go back because of how it ended there. But
I don't know, man. It did end poorly. It did, and I always remember the James Alcott video of when he left. James was heartbroken when it happened. But what better way to fix things by helping out?
He'll get a championship shot,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, there we go. That's another episode of Monday Vibes in the can. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe. Anything else you want to talk about, boys, before we wrap this up?
We've got Team Talk coming this week on Wednesday as normal. Other than that, standard week of FT content, building up for the return of club football.
Yes, come back to us, Premier League. Goodbye.